Hey guys, it's me, Sugar, and I'm here with my husband, Jeff.
Hello.
And today we're just kind of wrapping up the season and we're going to talk about what made our list, what was dropped, and how things went. Let's get going. So first off, what we had from last time is Are You Lost? And that ended up being dropped, which was of no surprise to me.
I gave it the 3-episode shot because I liked some of the legitimate actual survival elements, but then when you find out was never going to be what the anime was all about, I was like, oh. All right then. And I'm not gonna fault anyone for, getting enjoyment out of it or whatnot, but the whole, I don't know, it was fan service just for fan service sake, and that was all there was to it. And again, if that's what you're looking for, cool, but typically I tend to want things that are a little more substantial in my anime. If I want fan service, I'm probably looking to go for something else anyways.
Yeah, I think deep down I shouldn't say we both, because I knew it was going to be, but I think Jeff, deep down, wanted another Euro camp, where it was something that was slightly factual, but something that was kind of comfy or funny or, all that good stuff.
Maximum levels of comf, and no, this doesn't care about comf, it cared about...
Even if it was comedy, that would be fine, so we got some of that in Euro camp too, because I think... With our friends, we always joke about, we have the gif where her and the dogs.
Yeah. Haha, you couldn't get me.
Yeah. So, Are You Lost was kind of a flop, so we tossed that one aside. So, let's move on to the next one then. Astra Lost in Space. I heard a lot of mixed feelings about this one. Oddly enough, by the time it ended, I kind of waited to see what people were saying. And a lot of people were kind of upset about it, but I feel like it's odd because I really enjoyed it and the logic behind it made sense. Like initially I was like, well, we're not going to spoil anything, but it's like, well, that would never happen. But the way it's written, it's like, okay, by the end, it's like, I understand how it happened and why things started to happen. Like, I feel like all of it was legitimate and yeah, I feel like it was legitimate the way that it was written and it made sense and it was good. It was legitimately good.
I thought it was better than good. I thought it's probably my show of the season, quite frankly.
I don't think it is. But.
It's easy to... I can't say easy, but I, as opposed to Sugar, I'm far more into a lot of space stuff.
Right.
Give me almost anything that has to do with space, realistic or more, fantastical. And I'm usually, I can find elements of it that I like. This just, I can't point to a single thing where I was like, well, that didn't work for me, or, oh, that's crap, or, I like all the characters, I love the storytelling, I loved the world building that they did. I thought that it used limited amounts of CG to a point where, I didn't even really notice it too much in a negative way.
When you did notice it, it wasn't like, oh my god, that was really bad.
It was more like, oh, like, okay, there's a spaceship, but it's CG. Okay. That happens. It was, I thought that it looked beautiful. I thought all the performances were really good. We watched the sub, so we can't speak to the dub at all. I haven't watched the dub in any particular way.
I'm not sure if it has a dub, does it?
I'm pretty sure it does, yeah. But it was a few episodes behind, and I was like, nope, I want to be on it every week. Honestly, it was a very strong season. And also, I guess, a lot of the other stuff is going to be continuing onward. So out of the series that are, ending, this would probably be the one that I liked the most. I gave it a 9. I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, I gave it a 9, too. I feel like, as... excuse me, my voice. As Jeff said, I'm not, a huge... person that's I said that backwards. I'm not a person who's huge into space stuff unless there's some sort of hook. And I think the reason this got me was initially it looked really beautiful. The art style was really nice. Just ignoring some of the CG. It was really nice. And then the other part was the fact that it turns into a whodunit and why. It becomes a mystery. It's not just being out in space and surviving. It's about finding out what the bigger story is behind the one that's initially received. And I really like that because it did everything right in the sense of a mystery, It did
Yes.
everything right in the sense of an answer. There were a couple parts where I'm like, really? That's what they decided to do? But it didn't hurt the overall story.
And then there was one moment that happened where we were both like, wait, what? And we had to like, did they really leave the breadcrumbs to that point? And we looked back and we were like,
yeah, they did.
Oh, they did!
And I like that. I like things that are fair. It's not like something that comes out as a surprise and you're like, well, obviously it was this. I'm like, when the fuck was that obvious? Like, why would I have thought that? It's like, it's not fair. I didn't get a chance to guess. Or this whole time, due to, let's say, a choice of words, something that we both didn't notice. And it's because the attention wasn't put to it. So, of course, we didn't notice because you're trying to focus on all these other things that are happening.
Yeah.
So when it actually does happen, you're like, fuck.
Yeah, the second that it happened, I looked over to Sugar and I was like, did you catch that? And she was like, no. And I was like, is that legit though? And we looked back and we were like, oh my god, it is too. Like,
Yeah.
But it never felt the way they told the plot and the narrative, it never felt like things were too fantastical. It never felt like, oh, that's a cheat. None of it ever felt like really a cheat to me.
Yeah.
You're talking about an anime that is with a lot of space travel, so there are technologies that exist that
Are more
don't
advanced.
exist right now.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay. But given all of that, if you buy into that, if you could buy into space travel and that sort of stuff in your anime, then everything about this makes sense. I said I loved the characters. I loved the mystery element to it, and that they actually painted almost everybody as somebody who you could kind of question what exactly they were doing and why, and you're like, well, are they the ones who are kind of steering things in a weird direction?
Think of it as like part of the mystery. Like there's two folds to the mystery. But it's kind of like when we had like Who Shot Mr. Burns. It's like we have all these characters and all of them have a viable reason for doing what is being suspected. That's the best way I'm doing it without giving any spoilers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like everyone has a viable reason and therefore everyone is a viable suspect, which makes none of your choices wrong until you kind of like, once it's revealed, be like, obviously, because blank and blank. Things that aren't seen as necessarily huge hints or clues, which add up to our conclusion for who done it. I try to choose my words exactly so I don't give anything away. But it's really good.
Yeah.
It felt like it paid off. It felt like the end was deserving. I felt like the conclusion was satisfying. I felt like it ended on a really nice note. And of course everyone wanted to bitch about it. Being like, oh, it shouldn't have ended like nicely. It should have been like catastrophic. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
We have enough of that in anime.
It's like things can end nicely sometimes, Jesus Christ.
So what, like the people who you saw, because I see MAL, it has over an 8 now. So like that's usually my barrier for something to be like, okay, like this is fairly high quality. Yeah. The people who have negatives, what were they saying about it that they didn't like it as much?
Basically where it's like, oh, the pacing's off, and like I wish it would be like slower. I wish it had more episodes. I wish it would have like I believe some things about pacing with the manga. I wish it would have done blank. Like,
I mean,
it's like, oh, this is so unbelievable, and it's like, no, because it's explained. You just didn't fucking listen. Like that's, and I'm not gonna sit here and type like how many paragraphs to explain why that made sense. Like,
I guess
like the Steins Gate thing where it's like, oh, that doesn't make sense. It's like, actually, if you follow every jump and everything else, it does make sense. You're just making it difficult.
Yeah,
it's just like, fucking listen.
I think the whole I get the idea of wanting more episodes, but I think it's just because I enjoyed being in that world so much that I wanted more. It was only 12 episodes. The 12th episode was 45 minutes in length, so essentially
it was the first 13. One, I believe. It was about...
maybe. I don't remember.
So I remember them both being longer.
So, but yeah, like, I wish they could have spent a little bit more time here and there, but I don't think they had enough content for 24. So it would have been like 18 would have felt like perfect to me, but that's not how the anime industry works unless you are super special and you somehow get like a weird contract like that.
Right.
But the anime industry normally doesn't work like that. So if it was stick it into 12 to 13, maybe 14 episodes if they got double length for the first one, because I don't remember, then I mean, fine. Like that's better than trying to expand it into 24. As we found out with Card Captor Clear Card Hen, if you've only got like 12 episodes worth of content and you spread it out into 24, it makes the whole series real bad.
Yeah, like, I haven't read the manga. I just know it has 5 volumes and about 49 chapters. But otherwise, that's all I know about it. I don't know if it, like, strayed away from the manga, how the pacing was. I really didn't want it spoiled for me, because as soon as there's a mystery, I don't want to read anything.
Yeah, of course.
And then after the fact, I just haven't thought about looking into it as much.
Except for Promised Neverland.
Oh, I can't stop. It's like a bad habit. I am into it. I'm in deep. So, like...
So it's not always, but this one you were like, you know what, like, I'm okay with
Well, this one's short-lived.
Yeah.
So when stuff's short-lived, I'm like, I'm okay to sit and wait. Whereas Promised Neverland, the second it stopped, I was like, nope. I was like, I can't wait for whenever the next season comes out. And I'm so glad I didn't wait, because it's so fucking good.
And whereas, dear listener or watcher, even though our videos they're just podcasts, so you can just listen.
Listeners.
I take the shot. And I will wait for it, because I think that there is value in that. That's why I was really excited to have you watch the live action Ghost in the Shell before you then watched the actual anime.
Where there have been times
there's value in that.
I've drugged Jeff down, where I was just like, especially with My Hero Academia, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe you're not reading this because something so important happened. And I was like, oh my god. I wouldn't let him like not be bothered by me reading it. I was like, oh my god, you'd love this if only you'd read it.
And it's interesting, like the weird cycles we go through, because I go through a spell where like I'm totally up to date with the manga. Yeah. I was like 25 chapters ahead of you, and then you were like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna do this, and then you got like 10 chapters ahead of me. I think you're about
I go through like
12
cycles.
to 15 chapters ahead of me right now.
Like, obviously I say I love anime, and it's true, I do, but I find that I personally, and some of you might relate to this, some of you might not, I go through cycles. Or like, I can give you an example of the last few months, where I was really into anime again, so I was watching it like crazy. And then I kind of got like, not tired or bored of it, just kind of into a funk, where I'm like, okay, now all I want to do is just binge manga. So like my friend brought over her manga of like some of the darker stuff I haven't read it yet, which, is in my house now. Or home, and then I like binge Promised Neverland. I binged like Happy Sugar Life. I started binging My Hero Academia, obviously, and I did that. And then after I was like tapped out, and I hit a certain pace where I like finished all of them, I'm like, okay, now I want to watch movies. So then I had our friends over. We watched movies nonstop for like a month and a half. And then after a while we got busy. I'm like, okay, now I want to watch TV series. So then I started binging them on Netflix and binging them on like anything else. And then, I'd still keep up obviously weekly with the seasonal anime. But like when I get really into it, it's totally different, where I just binge series like one after the other the second I'm bored or have free time. But right now, I guess, what am I doing right now? Obviously, doing seasonal anime, and then I think it's just really working lately. I've just been really tired.
I mean, there is an anime that we'll talk about in a little bit that we've almost caught up on it now, which is impressive because it's like 300 episodes long.
Yeah, we did binge that, so that is true. We did do some anime, but it's been mostly us working 2 jobs each and then getting tired and going to sleep. But yeah. To get back on track, Astra Lost in Space is really good. And I recommend you watch it. But with that being said, let's move on. Okay, so the next one is Carole and Tuesday. And as far as I'm concerned, it's been really good. It's been consistent. The art's been consistent. I found it odd that a lot of people that I was talking to were really kind of miffed that it's very on the nose for how our landscape is right now. But I find that odd on 2 things, because it's always been that way. And B, it's like, I'm forgetting his name now. The creator of Cowboy Bebop. Like, that's his thing. It's being like, he's very much in touch with what's going on. And he's very much like culturally aware, and you can see that in Cowboy Bebop. You can see that in like
He's
most of his
very
works.
culturally aware of what's happening, particularly in North America.
Yeah.
Because he's come out and said he has a fascination with North America. Just the same as like we have a fascination with Japanese culture.
Right.
He has a fascination with North American culture. I think where the disconnect might be is that him being on the nose for like the music industry was a little different than him being on the nose for politics.
But because I don't see why it would be any different. In my opinion.
Some people just don't want politics as something that becomes a huge element. Because it's like, it depends on what you're watching anime for. Some people just want pure escapism. They don't want to be reminded of the fact that, oh yeah, you know,
the world sucks right now.
We live in a world where Donald Trump is the president, and he basically is, you know, trying to remove basic human rights from entire groups of people. And it's sort of like, definitely with the later parts of, I guess, the second core of Carole and Tuesday, it definitely leans a little bit harder into that sort of stuff. And because they definitely have a character in the show who is an analog for Donald Trump. And it's like, because of how, you know, amazing it is and how on the nose it is with the current landscape of, you know, music and politics and whatnot, and art, it will remind people who just want escapism, like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. Now, the counter to that I would say is that art and culture and music all will be made in reflection of government, of politics. You know, I mean, just look at NWA, for example. They were, beyond being musicians, because they were very talented musicians, they were a political movement in their own rights. They were a response to things that were happening. And so that sort of thing does transpire very often in art and in music. So that makes sense, especially if you want to have something that does have something more to say. And the thing is, I don't think he's ever going to make something that doesn't have something to say. Like, he's not just going to make something that's like, oh, I made this because it seemed like it would be fun. It's like, no, he's always got a message. He's always got something else going on behind his creations.
And sorry, I forgot his name for a second. It's Watanabe.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't know what people... I guess obviously everyone can get upset about everything. I know that personally. Watching everybody get mad at
culture.
me. Getting mad at me about any little thing I say about something they love.
Attack on Titan is the best anime ever.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The last season was pretty good, but comparatively, like, the rest of the seasons, even when it was at its worst, everyone's like, I love it. I was like, you can love it. It doesn't make it good. Sorry. But anyways, back on topic. Carole and Tuesday has been good. I feel like it's been consistent. I feel like the longer it goes on, the more it's going to make different messages, especially we're seeing here now with their rival, that she's having, you know, familial matters. Can I say? I don't want to say anything to spoil anybody. And we're going to see that as well. And we're going to see, like, we've seen stalkers and so forth and everything like that.
Stalker, the rapper just came up recently.
The rapper.
And that was, like,
and obviously I knew as
poignant.
soon as it happened, I knew what was going to happen because we've seen it happen in our culture. But it was pretty obvious that it was likely going to happen. It was just a matter of when. It's kind of like upcoming. I'm pretty sure I know how things are going to play out. It's just a matter of...
it tells you at the start of every episode.
Well, shut up! I hate that fucking annoyance. Yes, I know how it's going to end. I mean, I know how it's likely going to get there, but we'll see. You never know. I can't be wrong. I've said that every podcast.
Yeah.
But yes, I fucking hate that on any anime recaps. Whatever, you know, it presumes that you're waiting week to week, whereas it gives you the answer every time, and it goes on for far too long. And everyone's
it's
like,
about 20
and
seconds.
people say like, oh, it's My Hero Academia. So I was like, it does for some of the episodes, and it just says how I became the #1 hero. And then it goes into it. It doesn't have like a whole fucking animation cutscene all the time, and it goes on for like too long, and that drives me crazy. It's not just Carole and Tuesday. It's about almost all things. For the longest time for Black Clover, I cringed because I was like, stop doing it. I get it.
Yeah, doesn't Radiant did the same thing, I think, didn't it? Something like it anyways. Oh no, they spoiled the entire next episode at the end of their episode.
Yeah, that's why I asked. It showed like next time, and I was like, don't watch the end. I was like, it'll tell you basically everything.
Next time, this is the episode in like 35 seconds.
Yeah, it's like so I don't need to watch it? Or...
That annoys me too. I don't have a problem with like next time and it shows like, 5 seconds. But
yeah, it has
Radiant did like 35 seconds. You're like,
yeah. Like a good example of that would be like on the newest Fruits Basket, where it's like next time, and it either gives the title of the next episode or it gives like a quick little snippets, and it's like, be there, as it used to be on like old anime where it's like, oh, this fucking awesome shit's gonna happen. You should be there because you care about these characters and you know who's gonna be in the episode. So yeah. But anyways, it's
Carole and Tuesday. I would give it right now a solid 8. I think the music is great. I love how on point it is with our culture. I will say that when it's moved slightly away a little bit from just the music industry and more into like the political landscape of music, I can see why some people maybe don't like it as much in the second core as they did in the first. But I still think that that's very important, and I like where it's going, and it's beautifully animated, as you would expect from Watanabe. The performances have been really good. I remember while we've been watching, Netflix does have the first,
I think up until the... the sisters.
Yeah, the sisters. And,
was it the mermaids or the sisters? I don't remember. 3 guys who sing curse words. Doesn't say that.
Yeah, and I think that the English... The dub is okay. I feel like, in particular, Carol's voice is actually very good in the dub. Tuesday's, she sounds like she's about 10 years old, and that kind of bothers me. But I mean, some of the other voices are pretty good too, but we'll continue on with the sub until its completion.
Yeah. So we'll be going and let us know how you're doing with that one too. So let's move on. Copcraft. I personally kept on for a little bit, and then I just dropped it because I just wasn't feeling it. I really like detective stuff. I like noir stuff, but just like that integration of fantasy, just, I don't know, it wasn't clicking for me. It wasn't that it was bad, it just wasn't clicking for me. And it's kind of like if you start reading a book and it's just not capturing you, and it's not making you have like a page turner, then you just let it go.
We don't have enough time to... We just don't have enough time in our lives to fill it with stuff that we like. Oh, that was okay, I guess. We want it to be bangers.
I have
bangers.
lots of stuff to watch, so yeah, I just gave it up. So
I wonder what it's rating on MAL right now. I'm gonna check it out.
You can take a quick look, but yeah, I don't know. I felt like it wasn't.
Copcraft has a 7. So
yeah, it's I didn't feel like it was anything super special. Like obviously, it was a little different from like your normal stereotypical either like. I guess reverse isekai where somebody else gets brought into the normal world, or like a investigative kind of story. It was kind of, Let's move on. Okay, let's talk about Dr. Stone. We had a recording and we lost it, so we're doing it again.
That's fine. I feel like now we can be more succinct and to the point about it.
Don't get your hopes too high.
You know what we're like, so.
Yes. Anywho, let's get to it. Dr. Stone. In our last podcast, I had stated that Dr. Stone was a bit of a lull for me. It kind of seemed to be something that had a lot of hype behind it, but then when it came to it, I was kind of left wanting.
Yeah. As compared to something like Promised Neverland, which had a huge hype machine behind it, and then it was like, oh my god, this was even better than the hype machine made it seem.
Exactly. Like, so Dr. Stone, once it started, was rather slow. Like, if I gave you a video of the things you look for when you drop it, or expect something mediocre, I would have expected this to be a 7 at most. And likely, after a couple episodes, I might have even dropped it, because not a lot was happening. If we go through our checklist of kind of things that do and don't work for it, let's talk about the art. The art has been pretty good and pretty consistent throughout, especially this last episode we had here. We had a great moment with the art. It was done really well. Mm-hmm. I feel like, like I was saying, it's really consistent with our characters. A lot of characters are done really well in the sense of design, in the sense of feelings, and having a little bit of backstory and reasoning. But then we also have characters that are very lackluster and stereotypical, like our main villain, or I should say our antagonist, and some of like our villagers and some of the other people that are problems. They're very stereotypical, and it's like they're big, they're brooding, they're just, you know.
For a series, it just the thought processes of antagonists, or at least the people who aren't really following our heroes, it's very I don't know, it just lacks something. Like, they just feel very one note. They feel like they don't have any nuance. There's no subtlety to it. It's just basically like, we disagree with you and we think you should die, so go die. It's like, well,
yeah,
that's kind of disappointing. But I mean, I'm going to assume that as it moves on, you probably get, you know, better sorts of antagonists, or at least people
Stories
who have different,
so
you know, sort of ideas.
Yeah.
That being said, like, it doesn't help it also that, like, it establishes in the first few episodes a few different characters who then end up going off to do their own thing, and it was like,
they're not really being followed anymore. So
I really liked them. I liked those characters. I wanted to see more of them and their interactions with our main character, who I do love our main character. I think he's awesome.
It's so funny because originally you're like, I think he's a bad guy, and I was like, I don't think so. I think he's just very charismatic and excited about what he does in science. I didn't feel like he was a bad person per se. I just felt like he sometimes made scientific judgments even though they deterred other people's feelings.
I mean, and I get it. He like he says over and over again, is just like, science is all about trial and error, and sometimes, you know, things will happen that you don't want to have happen.
Yeah.
You know, people probably have, there's been people historically who have
done terrible names in the name of science.
Yeah. Or like Marie Curie, she establishes one of the most important technologies we have today, but it killed her. Stuff like that, where it's like, ooh, all right. And so he kind of comes across, you know, as that sort of a character. I was worried that he would be too eager to move too fast into technology, and that would, and, you know, something like that could maybe eventually happen. I could see that actually being a story angle that we take, but currently, no, he's just like really gung-ho about, like, I remember all this stuff, and I love science, and I love the idea of being able to
move society
forward real fast.
And that's the thing, when we're looking at, like we were talking before, and like when you're looking at Shonen Jump, which is where a lot of these shonen reside, it's when you're trying to compare it to something like Naruto, even, like, watching Naruto, I knew right away that it was something special. Yeah. I knew that there was substance there. I knew that it was going to lead to bigger things. With Dr. Stone, as much as people hyped it up and the fact that it was a big deal in its manga form, I expected something really big. And it kind of left me feeling wanting because not much was happening. And I know a lot of people have complained about it, and I understand that, where it's very slow-paced, especially the first while. Like, we're already into the teens now, right, for episodes. Yeah. And it's finally getting interesting now, which isn't a good sign for any anime, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, it like, a lot of people find the slow pace a deterrent. A lot of people don't like science, which is a deterrent. So you're kind of whittling down your audience. So we'll be watching it. Obviously, we'll continue watching it because of the fact that we know it's supposed to be good, and it's been decent the last few episodes.
I'd say it's better than decent. Like, the last few episodes, I would give it an 8. Like, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It's
overall, I wouldn't give it an 8.
And that's the thing, and that's why, like, hype is a double-edged sword, because like, hype gets more people into something, and so more eyes see it. But at the same point, if you hype up something so much, even if it's, you know, very good, using the MAL thing, 8 is a very good. Yeah. Even if it's very good, if you're expecting beyond that, then you're left disappointed.
That's
so that's maybe the word that I would use, except for maybe the last 3 episodes, where I was just like, this was really good. But that still felt somewhat disappointing with how much people were hyping it up. Especially when you compare it to some of the best of the year. Like, I never once felt that way with Dororo. I never felt that way for a second with Promised Neverland.
Right.
Mob Psycho didn't feel that way. Even I would put Astra. I never once felt at all wanting, except for wanting more. Right. I want more of this. And whereas Dr. Stone, I was kind of felt like, oh, okay, we actually got behind an episode and I didn't even realize. So
Yeah,
we
it's
caught
like-
up and then we were like, oh, well, these 2 episodes were really good. So that's good. But that kind of just goes to show you that it wasn't driving us in the same way that upper echelon of anime
like a
does.
good book, yeah. The other thing I had kind of an issue with, and I can't get into details because, of course, we never want to spoil things for you.
Yeah.
And Jeff just has his water bottle, so if you hear that whistle, that's what it is.
Yes.
But anyways, what was I going to say? Off track. Oh, right. The other complaint I have about Dr. Stone is the fact that, without spoiling anything, is I feel like it's unfocused at times. Where it makes it seem like one part of the story is very important, but then it splinters off into other ideas. And I'm trying really hard not to spoil anything, where there will be a focus and a new character, and we'll be like, okay, that's now the objective, but it's like, oh wait, we want to go back to this objective because...
I mean, it does a good job after the fact of explaining because it'll be like, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're like, oh, okay, like why? And to its credit, it does explain usually, like, oh, we have to do this for this because of
but
this
then
and that.
my frustrating thing the last few episodes, it's like, well, we're going to do this because of this. It's explained. I said, okay, that makes sense. And then, like, the last episode we had went against what he said, and I'm like, so we're going back to this being more important now, even though we had a timeline before. So it's like, okay, like...
I like the fact that it also, the most recent episode showed that our main character, Senku, it's not like he's an omnipresent, like, super intelligent, like, he is very intelligent, but he also...
has feelings.
His feelings, and not just that, but, like, in this episode, he made a mistake. He made a mistake in his reasoning and his logic. Not to say that his reasoning wasn't also, like, sound. He was like, why didn't you think of this response? And he was like, oh, yeah, that does make sense. Like, it's like, all right, fine. Yes, we'll do it. We'll do that. That makes more sense. So it's like, okay, that's cool. Like, I like it. I don't like it.
There is room for error. And I
yeah,
think
there is room for error.
That's also, like, portraying science.
Yes.
It's not always a perfect, even if you have the best of intentions and the best of plans, it will not always plan out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was a good example of that, where just because it sounds good doesn't mean it will end well.
Yeah.
But
and it isn't just like, Senku is the smartest man ever, so he'll always be right. It's like, no, he won't be. And the anime has done now a really good job of showing a couple of times where he made a judgment call where you could see his argument, but you're like, but there's a better option. And then another character is like, this is probably a better option. And he's like, oh damn, yes, you're right.
yeah, so I would say it's not for everybody, especially at this point. Like, if we found a natural, like, hopping in point, we'll definitely recommend it. But I feel like there's a little bit of a deterrent for a lot of people with it being slower, with it being science. But that's not to say it's bad. I won't say it's bad. It's just not what we were expecting. And then the fact that it's also not made for everybody doesn't help it. So let us know what you think. But for now, we'll let you make your choice and see if you're going to watch it. Otherwise, let's move on. Next up is Fairy Tail, the last season. And we didn't include it in the last podcast because we hadn't fully caught up yet. But now we are not...
We're pretty close. Like,
yeah, we're not at the end, but we're...
There's 51 episodes in the final season, and I think we're done like 32 of them.
30-something, yeah.
Yeah, which, if you know, I think we've been... Ever since I kind of joined in on watching Fairy Tail, I think we've pounded through like 150 episodes in like 5 months or something weird like that. Like, it's been a lot.
Yeah, and I can honestly say I'm disheartened that Fairy Tail's ending. I know a lot of people hate it. And I might make... No, it's hate.
I think
a lot of people hate it.
Some people just think that a lot of what is done is like, it's... I can understand, because I made this argument earlier, where like some of the fan servicey stuff, I can see why people would dislike that. It's just that I think that fan service, usually I would use that phrase for like a lack of content, or that's the only content that is there, like that's the only purpose of it. And that does not explain Fairy Tail.
I would say the creator of Fairy Tail loves women, and that's the best way I'll say that.
I mean, and hey, even My Hero Academia, the creator said Mineta was totally thrown in just to be like, he's like, I also just really appreciate girls. There are people who just really appreciate and like girls, and that's part of it.
If you saw Midnight's original costume, you would totally get it. Like, go look into the manga where he has like the extra sketches, and yeah, it was a lot darker.
I will say there was one that a current character, at least current to where we're watching it, character definitely
Don't
pushes.
say his name.
It pushes the envelope of, you know, like the...
This person's power is the ability to induce pleasure, and let's just say it slightly threw the story off the rails, which was kind of frustrating, but otherwise the rest of the season has been really good.
Yes.
I liked it. I had the emotion I wanted. It had some of the sweet hookups I wanted. It had some great moments. Again, where we had emotional like parts where I did cry. And it was just good. And I know a lot of people ask, so it's like, well, can I jump in the last season? You can. It's just the fact it doesn't have as much emotional investment. Mm-hmm. Because by this time, we've realized the power of a lot of these people. We've realized their relationships, all the shit they went through, why it's important that these people are in this battle, what their significance is, what it means, and like by the end, if they live or die.
I will say the final season has pretty much answered almost every single question that you would have about this world and how it worked. Yeah. And it makes sense. For like, as I watched it, I was like, okay, wow, there's a lot of like weird like story threads, and I'm not sure how they're all going to weave themselves together and what it's all going to mean. And then I was like, oh, he did it. Like that's the only thing I could really say. Yeah. He did it.
So that was Jeff going in, and he's like, these are the answers I want, and if I don't get them, I'll be upset. And thankfully they answered them. So we're getting closer to the end, and it makes me sad because I really like Fairy Tale, and as I've said in other podcasts, I initially stayed away from it because I knew about all the fan service that was in it, or should I say the TNA. But honestly, it's been really good, and I feel like I might make another video about why it's good, about it as a whole.
I will say, like, in terms of shonen, I would put it as a B+. Like, it's not up to the same level as, it's not like a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. It's not My Hero Academia. It's not a Naruto.
No.
It's not, technically, it's also a shonen. Like, it's not Death Note. Like, it's not to that level, but I think it's right below those ones.
I feel like it has a place, and I feel like a lot of people haven't recognized a lot of its significance, and I'll get into that in another video.
I feel like that's a North American thing because Fairy Tail sold really, really well in Japan for a number of years.
Merch. The only place I've seen them having merch is basically in Hot Topic, and that doesn't help me. But anyways, off topic. Fairy Tale's been really good. It's
been a
paid
solid
out.
Concluding like season.
Obviously, we haven't seen the finale, like the end, but I feel like it's satisfying in all the ways that I've wanted so far. It's just sad that it's ending. So that's all I want to say right now, especially since it's ending. Let's move on. So the next one is Fire Force, and I feel like, again, it's been an odd season where actually an odd year, where so many people are very divisive on it being, whether it's being really good or really bad.
There is a correct answer to that.
Fire Force, in my opinion, is really good. Like, the action is good. It's from the same guy who did Soul Eater. I never watched, well, I shouldn't say that. I watched part of the original Soul Eater, then somebody spoiled what happened, then I had no interest. But Fire Force, I would say, came out swinging, got everyone's attention. I feel like at times people are upset about its pacing, but I feel like it kind of has to for what it wants to achieve in the time it has.
I don't understand that argument. A lot of things have happened in 11 episodes.
But I mean, like, a lot of people bitch that, like, when things happen, they happen too fast, and then the things that are slow happen too slow. Like, I didn't read the manga, again, because I don't want to be spoiled for this one, because I feel like it is at a nice pace for me. Mm-hmm. I like the characters. Let's do the checklist again. Art has been stellar.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
The animation's been great. The action saw it specifically. Like, if we have another, like, Crunchyroll Awards where there is an action fighting scene, it might be in there.
It should be in there. It
should be in there. I say might because who the fuck knows every year.
I would argue that the best shots of it in action rival the best shots in My Hero Academia.
Well, we haven't seen the new season, have we?
I'm just saying.
Let's not get ahead of
everybody,
ourselves.
I think most people, if they're going to point to like the high point of MHA, just in terms of, let's say, animation, would be Deku versus Todoroki. Where people say like that was a high point for the animation of...
Are we talking... Oh, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. My brain crapped out there. Yes. Deku versus Todoroki, and then the second one would be obviously All Might versus All for One.
Yeah, like in just terms of like animation quality of a fight.
When that happened, everyone was like, holy
sequence and choreography.
Shit. It was great.
I think Fire Force matches it, honestly.
I don't know if it matches it. I feel like the art is really great, and some of the music is good. But when you compare it to Todoroki versus Deku, obviously this is another... That was last year, right?
The second season.
The year before or something. Yeah. And, like, comparatively, if you had an art class, I could break down exactly why that fight is way better. But we don't have to worry, because that's not this year. So, to say that, I don't feel it's comparative in that sense. But I feel what Jeff's getting at is that the way that motions and power is put forth in Fire Force and shown in the fights is very moving and is very impactful. I feel like a lot can be said in some of the fights that we have, I'll say with Rekka. Like, that's a very meaningful fight, and it was very well done from the moment of entrance, which I play on repeat, from the moment of entrance to the finale of that fight. I feel like it was really good.
It's stunning how many uses of fire they already have. Not just in terms of, like, the way in which they use their power, but just, like, showcasing fire in motion in different ways.
Yeah.
Like, there's been people using it like a gun. There's
like
been people who are
using
character. It like a flamethrower. People who are using them as, like,
flying
booster rockets and for flight. And people turning them into dancing little critters or flying blossoms. Like, it's incredible. And each one of those effects is drawn and animated in a different way that showcases it. It's like, yes, it's all essentially like fire or, you know, plasma, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
But, like, all of it is very different, and it's beautiful, and it's magical, and just, it's so good. It's so good.
It's very good. And I feel like can I say what's the term they use? The devil's in the details, literally. But I feel like a lot of things that they do are subtle, that are really amazing. Like, the action parts are obvious. Everyone sees it and they're like, holy shit. But I feel like moments, which I pointed out to Jeff, which I love, and it's not just, there's one moment I really love, but overall it's happened several times, where Princess Habana, when she has that moment with our main character, and he says something and her eyes turn to hearts, and it's such a cute and a beautiful moment. And then we have our other characters, which we know are a big deal and have something significant about them, like we saw in our last episode, that their eyes are different, and it means something for each person, kind of like in Naruto. And I feel like that's significant because it implies what we're about to witness. And it's very significant. Then there's other ones we have seen and we don't exactly know what the difference is yet, but we see it in action. So we get to see these different things in play that are subtle, that are meaningful, but that a lot of people aren't noticing because it isn't heavily implied, which I like when things are subtle.
I love and again, subtle is such a great word choice because the world building has been very subtle and amazing, and I appreciate it so much because I think we can spoil the fact that the whole series is about people are spontaneously combusting.
Right, it says it right in the opener.
People are spontaneously combusting.
Yeah.
And so in a world where essentially it's almost as if fire has like taken on a life of its own, and it is just being created, there's a multitude of different ways in which people are approaching it and understanding it. There are people who all they want to do are like, these people are suffering, let's respectfully put an end to their suffering. There's people who are like, okay, like my firefighters fight them, I need to keep their spirits up. These people are dead now, like it doesn't matter. Like, respect, not respect, what does it matter? They are a big flaming ball of fire now that they just need to be put out. Like, there isn't, any respect for that sort of thing, And then, so there are people who, they're just on fire, and it's like, we don't need to care about them, we need to care about the living. There are people who are like, well, we need to figure out what this is, and they're cold calculating science behind it, where it's like, we don't need to respect these things, they are now the answer to what's happening. There are people who see this is like the second coming of some weird Jesus figure that's all about fire and flame, and so they create this evangelical society that's based off of, that sort of stuff. And all of these sorts of mentalities, it's subtle, but it also is exactly, I feel like, how it would play out. So none of it feels like, oh, well, that's totally unbelievable. It's like, no, that's exactly how this would happen. It's the same sort of thing that I made with, argument that I made with Made in Abyss, where it was like, there are going to be people, so many different thought processes and different thoughts on life and whatnot are going to be examined looking at this phenomenon, and there's going to be entire societies that are going to be pushed into certain avenues. And in the process of like a dozen episodes, I think they're maybe on like episode 11, somewhere in there.
Can't remember.
They're showing all of that already, and I'm very impressed. I'm so impressed with their ability to do that beyond just like the whole firefighting fire. That'll look cool, and it does. It looks amazing.
Yeah, it does.
But it's also the world building that's happening,
right.
The character analyses that are happening, and the ways in which different characters kind of view themselves in this world. Like, it boggles my mind how people can just be like, oh, it's too slow, or oh, it's boring, or oh, I don't care about any of this.
Mm-hmm.
That boggles my mind how people can view it that way. I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and like to add on to what Jeff said, like I really like that each of these people have their own views of what's happening and their own views of how religion is played into their life and what it means and what death means. And no, it's not like necessarily super religious show. That's not what I'm implying. It's just the fact of when people die, of whether they get put to rest in a nice like rest in peace way, or if they just get obliterated because they're nobody now. I like those kinds of philosophies where they kind of go back and forth between what is right, what is wrong, and people who don't agree with each other and why. I also like the fact that we have different districts and we have different companies, and by companies I mean the people who fight the Infernals, and how they have a very different approach to everything. Like in our latest episode, we had a company that initially they didn't agree with, and it seemed very obvious why they didn't agree with each other, and yet once it was explained and seen through the villagers' perspective, it gives kind of another layer of how others understand it in this world, of how things could or should be.
And the show has been very good at like not ever really portraying many of them as like, oh, they're totally villainous. Mm-hmm. Like some of them you're like, whoa, okay, like I don't necessarily agree with that, but like, they do a good job of explaining it.
Yeah, like we've already seen somebody who is kind of insinuated as being the good guy, and they've already turned out to be the bad guy, which I like, as you feel like you know who your friends are and who the good and the bad guys are, but in reality, anybody can be the bad guy. And I feel like that's another great quality of the show. So personally, I really love it. I think it's something that you should be watching because it's really great. I think a lot of people see it for the flash and not the substance. I feel like a lot of things are happening, and I feel like a lot of people are distracted by the TNA, again, like Fairy Tale. There are moments that obviously it's some fan service, you get some tits and ass, and yes, at times it feels a little out of place, but you know, that's the creator's own objective and what they want. I feel like it doesn't detract when the story is this good. Mm-hmm. I felt like if it was something like, I don't want to even say anything else because I was like, I don't want to shit on anything else. But if it was a lesser story, I'd be like, well, it is what it is.
And I mean, this it feels a little bit like, you know, teenage frivolity, you know, like it just, this is just sort of stuff that happens, and sometimes it is things.
What do you mean just frivolity? Like there's parts where like the one girl keeps like falling into his face, like her tits or ass or whatever. Totally unnecessary to the story, totally irrelevant, but it happens. And I'm willing to look past it to see like some of the better story that's happening. Yeah. Like even our last episode, we got a great story with Maki. We had a great story with how the 8th Division was created. Like, all of that was great. I felt like it was all very substantial. And to get the odd TNA per episode, I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
Obviously,
last episode, we didn't have any.
I'm trying to think now. I was like, did we? But even, like, there, it's like, even if we get the odd time, obviously I'd rather it be out, but it doesn't make it worse because of it. If it was something like, let's look at it this way. There's lots of TNA in Konosuba. And let's say there was nothing remotely good about it in the sense of it being funny or having a quality story. Then I'd be upset. Because all it is just basically a TNA fest. But I could look past it, except for the one episode. I could look past it in Konosuba because it was usually used for humor and it was just kind of a laughing moment. Where I feel like in this, it gives a little bit of awkward levity to the show, which a lot of people don't like, which I understand because of the circumstance, because it's rather, I wouldn't say it's dark, but it's on the morbid side at times, like especially the last episode getting into death. So I feel like that's the creator's way of giving levity, even at sometimes it feels inappropriate.
And the thing would be, and I could be reading way too much into it, and it is, at its core, it's a business, and that sort of stuff will sell your product as well to certain people.
Don't get me wrong, the girls' outfits, the way they're designed, it's like, TNA.
Yeah.
And it's, don't get me wrong, it's cute and everything, and I don't mind it. But it's just the moments where, like, obviously, ass grabbing, tit falling, all that shit.
Yeah. Like I said, I think what it could be also is that, like, people who, and this is just kind of like a statistical or historical factor, you want to call it, people who have to work in those sorts of lines, like, and that's line of business, like we're talking, cops and firefighters and an ambulance and whatnot, to bring, like, some, they have to find some levity in things, and so the way that he's written it in is, like, kind of some slapstick sort of like
stuff that wouldn't normally happen. Yeah.
But it's not as if, like, a lot of people have really dark senses of humor if they're in that line of business. And
I know a guy who's a horribly dark sense of humor.
And I know like there's a whole history now of firefighters taking calendars of themselves almost naked and things like that. And so there is like a historical factor to the kind of the, what they're doing is horrible, and it plays on your mind, so you have to have some levity. You have to do some things, even if it seems like maybe it's inappropriate. Mm-hmm. It's like, you have to bring it in, otherwise you're just telling these people living your grimdark reality forever. And I'm like,
and don't get me wrong, I feel like the story would be perfectly fine without it. Like, I feel like there are moments with comedy, especially with, like, our knightly figure. Like, our last episode made me laugh really hard. But, like, that kind of stuff would be enough for me, but I guess they wanted more in it, but to each their own. I don't feel like it takes away from how good it is. Mm-hmm. And no, I'm not going to make that reference. I was about to say, no, I'm not going to, like, it'll get me more shit.
most, and this is, again, most shonen do have those types of characters who are like that, and that happens. Yeah. In Naruto, you had Tsunade, who definitely is a buxom beauty.
Jiraiya.
And Jiraiya, who's the old
Kakashi a little bit.
And Full Metal Alchemist, you literally have one Sin, who I think she is only clothed because if she was naked the whole time, you couldn't sell it to teenagers anymore. And so there's a history of that. I mean, even the original Dragon Ball, Bulma, and like the whole
she was
like
naked
thing.
a couple times.
She's naked a couple of times, and she showed off her panties and all this sort of stuff. Like, that's just, it's something that is almost expected of in the genre at this point.
It just happens. That's like the best way I can put it. It just happens. So if you can look past the couple times where it gets a little TNA, I feel like it's very substantial. I like the characters. I like where it's going. I like what it's set up. And to say the very least, the action shots are breathtaking. All the fights we've had, even our slow-mo shots where we had with our one captain was just fucking boss. And a lot of the I shouldn't say quirks now, I'm getting into My Hero Academia, with all of their abilities, each one you think like, there's only so much you can do with fire, and then it's surprising what else they do, and the fact that some of them are modified so that they aren't always dealing with fire, and if you want to know what I mean, you should watch. So let's move on. So I guess before we move on really quickly, Jeff reminded me that they are being simulcast for Fire Force, and we've been watching the dub because I like Todd Haberkorn.
I just Todd Haberkorn. Like, all of the performances have been really good.
Been really
I
good.
can't think of one where I was like, that's not appropriate.
So I was like, right away, as like Hibana started talking, I was like, Urza! I was just like, But anyways, just wanted to give you a quick heads up.
And so we can't speak to the sub because I haven't watched a single episode because I haven't felt it necessary to do that because the dub has been excellent.
Yes. So anyways, the next one, Fruits Basket. I'm so happy I got to see the new one because it's good, and I knew pretty much where it was going to end for the season, and I was right. It was just more exciting seeing Jeff watching it because he hasn't finished the first season. He watched a couple episodes and then waited for this one.
You mean the first series?
Yes, the first series, not season. This is the first season of this one. Yeah, anyways. I found it was really good. I'm glad it kind of fixed up some of the holes that were in the original anime. I'm glad that it's decided to include more stuff from the manga. I feel like talking about our checklist, the art was great.
I will say there was a couple of shots in the last couple of episodes where it was like, I think it maybe was done for more of a comedic tone, but like they didn't seem to have nearly as much expression in their faces anymore. So I don't know if that was... Like,
it was, some of them were intentional because it was like, I'm not going to say specifically what scenes, but I feel like a couple of them weren't perfect. Some of the faces on the odd shot, but I'd say 99% of the time they are perfect in regards to faces.
It was just noticeable because it was
one of those ones where it was like they're coming from a distance and it kind of should have changed a little bit and it just looked odd.
It was like that Pikachu face.
It wasn't the Pikachu face, but it was a little odd. But otherwise, I found the colors were really beautiful, kind of like a muted color, which I'd kind of expect because of its tone. I felt like the designs were good, similar to the first series, but better. I can ask Jeff what he thought of the art.
It was very good. It's very traditional for that style of anime. Like, it looks appropriate for the genre that it's in and whatnot. So, like, nothing about it, with exception to one character in an interesting transformation that looked very starkly different from the rest of it. And I really enjoyed that because it was being played up as to like how bizarre all of this was, and I was like, this is a world where you got a bunch of people turning into animals. Like, how bizarre can it get? And
I know Jeff kind of whispered that, but the whole premise of the show is the fact that there is a family, the Soma family, who are part of the Zodiac, are connected with the spirit, so to speak. And if they're hugged by the opposite sex who aren't in the Soma family, they turn into the animal that they are in the Zodiac. Yeah. So or if they get tired or like really sick, that also happens as well. So that's what he's referring to, turning into animals.
So in a world where people are turning into animals, and that's like fairly normalized within the context that we watch it, and everybody was like, this is gonna like blow your mind. I was like, okay, fine. I was like, oh, animation wise they did something different. It looks very distinct from the rest of the series. I was like, well, that's cool. I like that. I obviously have a fairly good, like, it has an emotional connection with me because I wish death upon a character more than almost any character I've ever met in a series, because they deserve death, because they are stopping the happiness of everybody else who just deserves to be happy. But that being said, like, the only criticisms that I can really give it are they'll jump between episodes, I feel, that really matter in terms of story and plot development, into just like stuff where you're like, I wanted to get more of like the important stuff, and then this episode comes in where it's just kind of like, fluff is the wrong word because it does help to establish more character, but it's like, you're getting into some really important and deeper stuff about the world.
Well, I feel like
it just went away.
Well, I feel like obviously these stories were obviously fucking computer. Anyways, I feel like a lot of these things were obviously talked about in the manga. It's just the fact that when it comes to the anime, they want to make sure that they end on a certain note for the first season. And I was pretty certain where they wanted to end on the first season. So they wanted to put some of those stories in between to give us some heads up for what's going to happen, as well as making sure we hit that natural point. I feel like, how can I say this? I know what's going to happen, obviously. But I feel like I'm hoping everything plays out and is stated as it should be, because even in the last episode, I feel like maybe they felt a little rushed for the end of the season, and they threw in a lot of characters like, oh, these people are going to be in next season. You don't know who they are, but they'll be interesting. Yeah. And I feel like it was very fast to the main viewer to be like, were those people we knew? Were they people we didn't know? Who the hell are they? I haven't seen them before. So I feel
showed another character who we do know in the relation, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess they're going to have something together, and maybe not, and it's like...
And so, like, I feel like at times there was also, like, people talking then, and there were shots of other people implying that those things that were being said were going to happen with them, but as the reader, I know they meant something else. It meant something else. So I hope things in the next season, or seasons, depending on how they want to play this out, do flesh things out so everything's understandable. Because there are the odd things where Jeff's like, I just don't understand blank. And he's like, maybe they'll explain it to me. So I've explained it to him in a way that doesn't spoil anything else, just giving a little more context to why things were said or implied or whatever. So I hope that's kind of given soon, because I feel like for people who haven't watched it or might be a little confused about what some of the meaning is or the importance,
and
or
they have a tendency to speak to each other in a way where they know what they're talking about and the viewer has absolutely no idea, and like to a point though.
So if I was a reader, I know exactly what they're talking about, but to Jeff, he's just like, okay, like
it's technique that's used a lot, but it can be done definitely a little bit better, where it's like, I'm being vague for vague's sake, or like, what is it called? It's called the pronoun game, where people do not mention names. They're just like, oh, they will become involved soon.
And don't get me wrong, some of those tools are used in the manga because these things will be coming, and they don't want you to have an idea.
It feels like, it's almost like they want to cue you into like a mystery, but it isn't a mystery. They just are like, we just don't want to talk about it yet.
Technically there is a mystery, but you don't know that yet. So... yeah, that's the thing. I can't say much without like spoiling anything. It's just like, trust me, it'll be good. I just wish that some of things would be a little more clear for people who haven't watched it. I know they're heavily relying, not heavily, but decently relying on the people who are huge fans like myself. And like one of my friends, we're both watching it. And we're really happy with it because we're like, oh, the things we wanted initially, they're here now. But I know when I put myself into Jeff's shoes, I'm like, that scene wouldn't make a lot of sense until he knows what's going to happen, and who knows if he's going to remember this moment when that part happens in the next season.
Well, considering the next season is until 2020,
and I know I'll be there to be like, remember when they did this? But I know a lot of people won't have me there to be like, remember when this was said to be important? It is because of
remember in episode 17 when he said this about this and that and that?
Remember when he said that one word? It was implying this. Yeah, this exact moment.
But on the whole, like, I'm nitpicking some stuff. I gave it an 8. I thought it was very good. I think it's interesting because it kind of flirts a lot of times between very comedic points and then really down, sort of almost dour moments. And it doesn't... It sometimes doesn't feel like it gets to those points naturally. It feels somewhat artificial sometimes. I feel like it kind of does sad and morose better than the comedy. The comedy is very outlandish in comparison to
that's how
the rest of
manga
the story
was,
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just taking that translation.
There's a little tiny bit of a disconnect there where it's like, oh, very serious, dour moment, and these are real characters with deep, opinions and like things that have happened to them, and like emotional abuse and physical abuse and all this like serious stuff that has a lot of weight behind it. And then it's like, oh, I'm mad, I'm just going to punch through the wall. Or another character is going to punch somebody through the wall, or I'll break a table. It's like, you almost, I get it, again, it's a part of anime, but it almost kind of then shoots yourself in the foot with the serious stuff. sometimes I feel that way, but on the whole, it's been very good.
So I understand that kind of conflict between like funny and sad and so forth, but I feel like it's kind of has to, like we were talking about with Fire Force, where it kind of has to have that levity, even though at times it seems awkward. Because I feel like you do have to pull away from some of the darker stuff, because I know we're not there yet, but it gets even darker.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and it was kind of something somebody said to me the other day, which I found was kind of interesting and odd. Somebody said the other day about how they didn't like not fairy tale. Lots of people tell me that. Fruits Basket. And I was kind of intrigued, so I was like, why? And they said, well, I don't like it because it perpetuates this like idea of violence against women, violence against whatever, and being like in abusive relationships. But I find it kind of an odd comment, because I'll give my 2 cents here. The whole point, I guess I shouldn't say that. A large part of Fruits Basket is the fact that it's built on relationships that are dysfunctional and unhealthy. And it goes into the next few seasons as that. And I won't say why or who or what. But even so far, we've seen in the first season of the new series that there are unhealthy relationships at play here. And it's not the fact that it's endorsing bad behavior. It's showcasing things that we do out of bad behaviors, making us worse. And so like when we see the interactions with our main guys and Toru, sometimes they're rough with her or violent, and it's because they don't know any better. And that's not an excuse, I know that. What I'm saying is the fact that haven't gotten fully into it. For those who are watching, they've had a very hard time as children, and a lot of it dealt with abuse. And they don't know, and it's kind of implied in the season end here with our main characters, that they're trying to be better people. And that's why we see the evolution for the guys and for the family and things that are happening, because abuse has been a large narrative out of most of the Soma's family. And I feel like that is part of the narrative. It's not endorsing it or saying that it's good. It's saying that it's bad and it hurts relationships. And I feel like that's what should be taken out of Fruits Basket. But that's my own personal opinion.
I think I know the precise moment that you're probably referencing, now that I'm thinking about it too with that. And I was like, I don't think the way in which that situation resolves itself does not at all condone anything that was happening there. I don't understand how somebody could see that and view it that way. I think it was just showing that, like, somebody who is damaged and broken and who makes a mistake, like, the first thing you have to do is have them understand that, like, they're loved. Like,
right.
Somebody who has been damaged physically, emotionally, psychologically, the first thing that you have to do is show that you care about them, because, and again, this is, both Sugar and I have worked in a youth group that has a lot of youth who have had these sorts of things. We're teachers, we've seen this. If somebody doesn't trust you, if they don't think that you have their best interests at heart,
they'll lash out at you.
They'll lash out, and they're not going to believe anything you say for a second.
Yeah.
So, like, if somebody does lash out and does something bad, yes, obviously you have to admonish them. The character even inner monologues about the fact that, like, they know what they're doing is stupid and wrong, but they're like...
That's the way they've always dealt with it.
And that's the way they've always dealt with it. And so, and the history that they've had is that they have been admonished for it, or they've been hated for it, or they've been like, oh, what do you expect? That's just the thing that they are. That's just the person that they are. And so to have something like that happen, and for you to come to that and be like, you've made a mistake, and you realize that, but you also have to know, like, I care. Mm-hmm. And that's the first thing that you have to know, is that I care before anything else happens. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that was... I don't think the anime, or even that particular scene, condones anything. Mm-hmm. And that the character involved actually basically talks about how they hate themselves and what they've been doing and all that sort of stuff. So, like, I don't... Because that's a pretty serious allegation to put against a form of media. And I'm just like, I don't think you can view it that way legitimately.
Not even just that moment, but there are other moments upcoming that deal with a lot of abuse, both in kind of lashing out and towards other people intentionally. But I feel, being a victim of abuse myself, I never felt like this was endorsing that. It's just showing damaged people being hurt by more damaged people. And I could get into a video about that by itself, but I just wanted to make that clear. I don't feel like that takes away from its show. I do feel it's very much of its time. Like, I don't feel very many anime now would, like Jeff was saying, make some of the jokes, kind of have some of the anime styles, which would have the story they have, having, love interests, because lots of love interests are had in Fruits Basket. I'm not going to say with who or what, but, that kind of story dynamic that a lot of girls read about in, like, the 90s or 2000s. But I feel like Fruits Basket is worthwhile. It's an interesting story. It's a long-standing story that's been beloved by a lot of girls and boys. And it's a classic for me. It's the very first manga I ever read.
Yeah. I think it's worth your time to check it out. I'm not going to say that I feel in a lot of ways, again, I'm not the biggest fan usually of slice of life type stuff, and this does a lot of slice of life, but it does it in an interesting way. And again, in a thoughtful way, when you're talking about, the damaged people and kind of how that kind of abuse, how it shapes them and it shapes, the next generation moving forward and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it definitely takes it takes the slice of life genre and does something different with it, something worthwhile. Mm-hmm. I can't say that if you truly despise slice of life, I don't think this is going to be the thing that, like, oh, this will suddenly make it all better. Mm-hmm. But at the same point, it does something unique and different, and something that it's a story that needs to be told in its odd little way, as opposed to something like I think both of Sugar and I lambasted Clear Card Hen for having just episodes upon episodes of useless, boring junk.
Shit.
You know what? If you want to show so much cooking and, like, eating, teach us how to fucking cook it at least. Like, do something. Give me something beyond just,
anything.
Like, look at this. And that's not even to say that, like, cooking and stuff like that can't be interesting. Restaurant to Another World was phenomenal.
So good.
But that was, like, that was so different than just, like...
That was so appeasing.
I'm going to make this egg roll, and then we're going to eat it. And that's going to take 14 minutes of our episode about magical girls.
I was like, fuck.
No, this has something to say. It is important. I can understand where, again, there is this weird disconnect between the really, important sort of social issues that they are discussing in their own way. Like, it would be odd to watch something like A Silent Voice and to have it crack into slapstick. Like, that would be weird, but that also is a difference of 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
From what I believe, I think the original Fruits Basket anime was like 2001. I think.
God, I can't remember.
Something like that, which would mean the manga was even earlier than that. So yes, in the span of 20 years, there is going to be a huge difference in how you tell these sorts of stories. And also, again, like, the manga business was different, the anime business was different.
Yeah, you're right, 2001.
And so, beyond anything else, we have to remember, because it's very different in North America. North America, beyond certain things, usually things are created with, like, it's really strong about creator intent and purpose, and, like, they have a message that they want to spend forward. Whereas with the manga industry, it's different, where it's like, you have an idea, but as well, you've got a publisher who basically is the one who's deciding, like, whether or not this will continue on. And you've also then got, like, oh, your TV series is going to be either 12 episodes or 24. That's it. And so you have to fit your story into that sort of constraint. You also have to then fit it into, like, well, you may have to make sure you hit a certain audience, otherwise there's no point in us making it. It's a very different sort of thing. So, North America, there's lots of crappy TV out there because it hits a certain market. They know it will make money. It's like both of those, and there's certain things that are made even without them being thought that they're going to be big money-making ideas, because, like, that's an important story. But I don't know how often that happens in Japanese culture, where it's like, this needs to be made because it's an important story, regardless of if it'll ever make money, especially in the anime industry. I don't know how often that happens.
I don't have a percentage on me.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially 20 years ago.
But either way, Fruits Basket Season 1 of the new series is done for now. The next season, it says it's going to be 2020. I'm not sure of the month yet. So I said it was really good. I liked it based on, obviously, where we were from the original series. And then, like Jeff said, he, as a new viewer, liked it as well.
I gave it an 8. And this is from somebody who doesn't typically like a lot of slice of life anime. So let's just show you. It's fairly high quality given my own particular views on things.
There you go. So, we have a couple more to go. Let's keep going. Next up, Maidens of the Savage Season. Holy shit. So we dropped it.
You know
All
what,
that to say, I dropped it.
That's something that when I have more time, I'm going to come back to it. I actually enjoy a lot of elements of it. It's just not good enough for our life as it's going right now to put more time into it.
Long story short, it had some good ideas about, like, you know, puberty and getting older. It just wasn't enough to keep our attention. Like, it was around a 7-ish.
Yep.
There were some characters that were kind of odd and things that I didn't like about it. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out, since there were some decent storylines in it. But overall, we just dropped it because we weren't really into it. We extremely like the other stuff we'd been talking about.
It has led to the best meme that we could ever come up with, though.
I'd say more of a gif, but yeah.
Well, we could fill in whatever we want in that empty space, though, which is great.
Technically, yeah.
If you've ever seen the one of it's a young girl who's pointing towards something on a board, and then on the bottom it says, "I approve of lewd materials if it is in high quality." High quality art or something like that. Yeah, and then it's like just something else is up there. It comes from this.
Yeah.
Because their whole discussion was that their book club was starting to read really lewd, racy stuff, and her as the president was like, "I approve of lewd material if it comes from high quality art."
Yeah. So
and I'm like, that's funny. And it was good. Like, it was fine. It was very honest and real about puberty and starting to explore, the sexuality of life. And
it kind of hit that tightrope of being funny versus really cringy. So it's kind of like back and forth, but that's really what puberty is.
That is. I can think of a bunch of cringy crap I did.
So, yeah. So some of it was kind of meh, but a good chunk of it, the parts they did well, they did really well. So we didn't drop it because it was terrible. It just didn't keep our interest.
It's a loaded season.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just
plus our 100 episodes of Fairy Tail.
Yeah. Well, the counter doesn't matter to me. It's just the fact that it couldn't keep my attention. Like, I thought it would kind of, what's the word I want to use? Kind of like
build up, improve.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a word, kind of momentum. That's the word. Once it kind of hit its stride and made these points about puberty and kind of hit its comedic thing, like when our incident happened and she went running screaming, I thought that was hilarious. Mm-hmm. But after that, it kind of died down. Then we had a couple characters that were doing like questionable stuff, which kids do, but it just kind of took away from our main storyline and kind of just went back and forth between being funny to not funny to not even cringy, just not funny. Mm-hmm. So hit and miss. I find it's kind of like when I said about Kaguya, Love is War. It's not that it was bad. I dropped it because it just couldn't keep my attention. Kaguya was a little different, though, in the sense that it was very repetitious, and repetition just drives me crazy at times. So again, neither of those are bad, just couldn't keep our attention, just wasn't more than a 7 to us. If it went on, who knows, shit happens. There's been times I've been wrong, but not very many. In the sense of it getting better. In the sense of me being wrong ever, I'm wrong a lot.
I mean, that happens.
As any person is. So let's move on, because we don't really have much else to talk about in that vein. To the Abandoned Sacred Beasts, again, another one that had an interesting concept, didn't know what it wanted to be, and in its indecision made us very confident in dropping it, because we gave it we gave it a lot.
I was gonna say, I'm normally of the mind that you give something like maybe 3 episodes.
At most times 3, yeah.
And we gave it 5 to 6 because I was really on the fence about it.
And since we've committed so much to it, at one point I might go back.
Yeah.
Another one that wasn't terrible. It's just out of its indecisiveness and bringing up the idea of, I guess it's not much of a spoiler, somebody being a vampire-esque character kind of threw me. in the sense
that
of
was
taking...
basically where we were.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like, when anytime there's, like, vampires thrown into anything, and that's something you know about me, into anything, like, whatever the shit was with, like, Pride and Prejudice and vampires, like, any of that shit, I'm like, I'm done. Not to say I don't like vampires, because I really do. Like, what they do in the shadows fucking killed me. And Helsing and anything like that. If it's just about that, I'm good. If you try and ruin something with vampires, I'll be pissed off. Same with, like, anything else that's just not called for.
Yeah.
It would be like having a story that's really good or decent, and then throwing in, I don't know, fucking Frankenstein's monster or something. It's just weird. And I just hate vampires being a loophole, because it's like, they never die. I'm like, oh my god, like, just stop. But anyways.
And yeah, like, I think we mentioned it a little bit in our previous podcast, but it definitely kind of waffled between this idea of, like, we want to be this serious kind of look at what people go through, what soldiers go through, and the fact that, you know, they lose a part of their humanity, and they could have went that way.
It hurts me because it's so deep. The times when it leans into it, I legitimately cried that one episode, and the other ones got me close, because it's true. That's how war is and what happens afterward, and a lot of things that people don't talk about in a meaningful way. Then it's like, no, what? I want to be a fucking monster show. Fuck this. We're going to do dragons, we're going to do all this shit, and we're going to be crazy. And I'm like, no, go back to war.
Like, if you would have committed to one
Not
or
go back
the
to
other,
war, go to the topic of war.
If you would have committed to one or the other, I think you would have hit more people than trying to combine the two.
I still feel like if it was about the whole war narrative, you would have gotten a lot of people. And if you go just fully monsters, I feel like it would have been less, but it would have been the concrete audience.
Yeah. Because I'll give it the credit that it deserves. The monster design is actually really good.
It was really good. The art was good.
The combat that does end up happening is
Pretty
really
good.
neat. But neither of those elements were anywhere near as cool as, you know, like what war takes out of you. That war necessarily turns you into a monster. Like here, it's literally, but figuratively, soldiers have to be turned into this sort of thing. Like a friend of mine was telling me. Like we're in Canada, so we're not usually involved in a lot of, you know, wars of aggression and things like that.
We're usually the peacekeepers.
Even so, a friend of mine who's now like career army said that anytime he goes out on leave, when he comes back, they take a week to deprogram you, because he said he's like, I did not like
decompress.
He's like, I didn't feel safe without having my firearm next to me. He's like, and isn't that a weird thought to have, to just put somebody back into society and have them always constantly feel unsafe because they don't have a sidearm with them?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, like they turn you, necessarily they have to turn you into this kind of unfeeling monster. And if they would have went into that and talked about the figurative and literal sense of that with the story, I felt it could have been an upper echelon anime. But then it just turns into, and there's nothing wrong with that either, like this, oh, I'm a monster and I'm going to kill these other monsters. And I'm like, cool, I don't mind monster fighting stuff either. Like, I love Pacific Rim. And that's literally giant robots fighting giant monsters. I'm like, cool, I'm in. But they meld the two together in such a way where it's like, you are lesser with both of these things put together than if you just would have done one or just the other.
Yeah. I just wish they would have stuck with the war aspect. Not just because I love history and the history of war, but it's just the fact that it's something that not a lot of people talk about. It's like a silent voice, in the sense that to a lot of people might be aware of it, but they don't fully grasp it till they see it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with war. Like, obviously I've done a lot of history, but like Jeff said, I know somebody personally who came back from war, and the things that they tell you, I feel like a lot of people don't understand. Like what Jeff was saying with the sidearm, and the fact that, like, they just have issues sleeping because it's always so noisy there. Like, being home is unnerving. And the fact that society moves on without you, like technologically, like just anything, and they just feel lost. And I feel like that's something that should be in more narratives, because it's very important of what happens to them when they go to war and what comes when they come back, that there's no real support for them. And yes, there's the decompression, like Jeff was saying, and things like that, and they do have counseling, but it doesn't match up to the damage that's been done. And I feel like that's a very important story. But anyways, this, I feel like if it would have leaned in, because the parts where it leaned in heavily was very emotional. It was very
very
sad.
impactful.
It was just like the few lines a person said made me cry. Even thinking about it makes me sad. But it's just like, as soon as they leaned away from it, it just made me, I was about to say sad, but disappointing, because I wasn't sad. I was more miffed.
Yes, and then the second that we're like, haha, I'm a vampire, like,
oh,
no.
Fuck.
No.
It's like, why? Why did you have to ruin this thing I liked?
Well, I mean, liked is maybe hard.
I did like it, the whole concept of war and that, but once it turned into
by that point it was already
but I mean,
waffling.
like, it was already waffling, but it fully committed to that.
It waffled to the wrong side.
It no longer waffled, it fully flipped into madness. So, that's a shame. But
and again, that's not to say you can't find some enjoyment in it.
Yeah.
That it might be, the kind of thing you're
I
looking for.
was about to say something really stupid.
Now that you recognize that
I was
it's
about to say,
stupid.
now that it's stupid, now I want to say it. I was about to say, if you really like Street Sharks. I don't know why that was the
Emotional Street Sharks.
I don't know why that came to mind. Maybe it's just because we were looking through like old stuff the other day. But anyways, no, Street Sharks. If you like, monsters and like different kind of mythical beings fighting people and other beings, like we had like harpies, dragons, you name it, kind of a fantasy-esque. Or if you like
rhinos and turtles.
Yeah. Well, that's not so much fantasy as it is.
No, I'm just saying, like, they do have a mixture of normal animals in there.
Mythical rhino. Anyways.
I mean, sadly, it's probably going to turn into that in like 100 years, but that's sad.
That got dark. Jeff knows I'm very much a conservationist, so I was like, that's dark. Which I'm dark too, so that's fine.
You laughed.
I was about to say, it's not fine that it's happening, it's fine that it's funny. Not that it's... I said I quit digging the hole. I'm just tired. Anyways, long story short, you can give it a chance. Not promising anything. Art's good. Some TNA as well.
I would give it like what we watched, like
a 6. Yeah. Let's move on. At last... Jeff's laughing at me because of what he thinks I'm gonna say. Anyways, last but not least is Vinland Saga. So, I'll say my piece first before we get into it. There's been a lot of talk of Vinland Saga, from Gigug, from Reddit, from whatever, and they said the manga's really great. Great. A lot of people have told me it's like so much like Berserk. Great. So I'm watching it. And we're watching it. And I feel like I have a bad attitude towards it for a couple things. 1, I don't feel like it's like Berserk for a lot of reasons. 2, maybe it's the fact that I am very much a history nerd, and the fact that I'm sure where the story's going to go, even though I haven't read the manga. And the fact that people are like, oh my god, that's so amazing that happened. It's like, well, of course it happened, because a lot of these are based on history. So I was like, of course these people will be there. But it's like, maybe that takes away from me too, because I'm like, obviously these things would happen. And everyone's like so amazed by it, but maybe it's because my history with war. I'm not as like baffled by it. I'm not saying it's bad. I will never say it's bad. My problem is, it has so much hype right now. It's one of the few times where I feel lesser about something. Because I don't feel like it lives up to the hype. Yes, some of the action scenes are good, and some of our characters, like Askeladd, are interesting and intriguing, but I feel like it's lacking. And I don't feel as if it's something that should be as highly praised as it is. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure the manga's great. Good for it. I haven't read the manga, as I said already, many times. But I feel like it's honestly just me watching a movie about history. And I've already seen this movie, not in anime, but in real life, in the sense of seeing these kinds of things play out. So I don't know if that's main reason, but I know a lot of people are really excited about it, and I'm not. That's not to say that we're not watching it, and that's not to say I hate it. And now I'll let Jeff speak. I want to make those things very clear before we got into it.
I'm going to agree with you on a couple of things there right off the bat. And to be fair, Sugar and I, we don't like massively disagree on this. Like, it's not like, I think this is the best anime of the season, and she's like, this is the worst. No. It's more just kind of, it's more interesting when we kind of disagree And so we like to explore that a lot more. The first thing that I will agree with 100%, it has projected greatness. People who are talking about how great it is are talking about how great it's going to be. Not
and don't get me
how
wrong,
great it is now.
I've done that too with My Hero Academia, with My Promised Neverland, other things. But in my defense, it lived up to the hype. Go ahead.
And so I think it is getting projected greatness.
Sorry.
Because lots of people are like, this is just the prologue. Like, even the better stuff comes later. And I'm like, oh, I'm excited. That's cool.
Yeah.
But it has projected greatness. Because right now, I can see the fact that, first of all, we start off with a character that I really, really like, and then they're no longer in the...
I guess I shouldn't say that.
And then he dives into the Sea of Abyss.
No, he's dead. Sorry. I'll put that in the spoiling the ending for...
So, yeah. So we have this character that I really like, that is super unique to this world, and you really get behind them, and you're like, I want nothing more than to see them succeed. And then they're gone. So you're like, okay. And then the character who you want to kind of take their place is the exact opposite of all of that.
And that's a part of me that really makes me mad. It's one of those stories where it's insanely obvious of how the father feels and makes it abundantly clear to our other now main character, and he does the exact opposite.
Yes.
And it drives me fucking crazy.
And that isn't to say that you can't get interesting stories with that, because
Correct.
he has shown himself to be conflicted.
Right.
He has been put into positions where essentially we already have the proof now that if he would just remove himself from the situation he's in and go off to just live his life, he would reflect his the way in which this other character kind of lived their life.
Right.
But because of his refusal to do that, he just devolves into this somewhat feral state, almost. It's something like that. Like, it's like all he cares about, is like doing this one thing, and it doesn't matter what he's got to do to make that happen. But it also only really is reflected when he's with this group of mercenaries, is how we'll phrase it. And so, like, that it intrigues me because obviously that's going to be the crux of our story moving forward, is the progression of this character, but also, like, it really annoys the piss out of me, where I'm just like, you even acknowledge in your own mind that you're doing the exact opposite of this man who you view as essentially like a king amongst kings. Like, you hold them in such high esteem, yet you refuse to kind of follow their example. And again, that can be the basis for really good storytelling. I just feel like it hasn't been yet. I will say I've enjoyed the combat scenarios that have been put in. There's been really good, like, hand-to-hand combat. There's actually been very good use of, like, they do a pretty good job, historically speaking, of, like, oh, these are how, these Viking raiders would have actually tried to, like, storm different groups. Then, yes, you do have a character who is literally tossing trees and stuff like that.
I find him interesting.
That's super interesting, and it does play into the idea that all
he
of these
was
characters...
also once a real person.
Yeah.
Not exactly like that, but...
they are mythologized? Is that what it is?
They are...
Mythologized might not be the right word.
It's not the right word. It's
but
kind of...
essentially, they're like, when we hear about, Alexander the Great, and we hear about, like, just these insane, incredible things that he's done, I'm like, some of that is obviously just talking up his abilities. And the same sort of thing is happening here with these characters.
Well, it's a little different. It's not talking up someone's abilities as much as, like, copying and pasting a character and making them into something else, so to speak.
Well, but I mean, it's sort of like...
Like, some of the facts about them are true, but some of them are very much not true.
When you tell these tales of these people who actually existed, you make them out to be larger than life, because that makes the story better.
Romanticizing.
Yeah, romanticizing. That's a good word for it. And I think the main thing here that Sugar is leaning into is something that we as Canadians actually have a leg up on everybody else on. Oh. Not a lot of people actually know the history of the Vikings, but because Vikings landed in Canada, we learn about them. It's part of our history curriculum in school. It isn't for the United States. They don't really they're like, oh, Vikings are cool, but they don't know what the actual history was. We were part of the Canada, is part of the English Empire, so we hear about all of these sorts of stories about the Norse coming and like the battles that they had and whatnot. We have that built into our school system.
I don't know, because some school systems I've heard don't talk about it, so I can't say every Canadian. It's more of the fact that I'm really into history.
Yeah.
Like,
but I mean,
I'm not saying I'm the only one. I'm just saying I might be one of the few that don't find it as interesting because of that fact.
Yeah, so like as Canadians, I feel like we at least have more tertiary knowledge of it than a lot of other places would.
I mean, like,
I can tell you right now, I doubt that Japanese historians are ever really teaching about the history of the Vikings. Like, it's probably not something that is normal to them.
Well, they'd probably be talking about.
They've got a lot of their own cool history.
They have a whole history. They're trying to remember the names of the people that would be like them. But anyways.
Yeah, and especially like in the United States, they don't really talk about any of that because it doesn't have anything to do with them. They didn't have. Eric the Red did not come down into their country and like find that area way before anybody else did, which is something that's really cool for us. We had European, essentially, settlers, or at least people who were traveling around, visit our shores in Canada before the year 1000.
But anyways,
that was super cool.
Other than the history lesson, which, I don't know everything about Vikings, but I know enough to be like, okay, so.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, we know enough that for us, it's like, well, yeah. Lots of other places in the world don't know that stuff.
I guess it'd be like somebody like making an anime about like, just because somebody brought it up to me recently, Christopher Columbus. Everyone's like, oh my god, this is a great fucking anime about Christopher Columbus. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And, like, it's not even great. It's just okay, in my opinion.
I mean, I would argue Vinland Saga, let's go through our points. Like, let's do that.
Puppy opener, though. It still makes me laugh fucking out. That little kid running on the bridge kills me.
If we go through...
Totally off topic, sorry.
If we go through our points, I think that you would argue that the individual pieces are very good. Animation, beyond a couple of bad uses of CG...
Oh god, the CG they use...
But beyond those couple of bad moments of CG, it looks really good.
It does.
The performances
I cannot deny that.
Have been very good. I feel like they've been...
I'd say pretty good.
I think that Askeladd definitely kind of steals the show right now.
Of course he does.
The father figure, though, was also excellent. I feel like there isn't anybody that I could point to. Even our main character, he's a squirrely little stupid kid, and he kind of acts that way, and he's performed that way, which I'm like, okay, that's fine. I think that, like I said, the animation quality is really good. I think it looks beautiful a lot of the time. Music, the use of music has been pretty good. There hasn't been anything... I was
about to say, I haven't remembered, like, music being amazing or anything.
There hasn't been anything where I am like, oh my god, like, that totally stands out to me.
I feel like that's a shame, because they should really lean into that.
Yeah, I mean, if Skyrim taught us anything, is that Norse music can be really cool. So, I mean, like...
So tired.
I think what it is, if I had to say something, is that Sugar was expecting a 10... is getting like a 7, and she's really pissed off about it. And people are expressing it as a 10, and that's pissing her off even more.
It's making me really mad because I think it's just like, I'm like, I don't care that much about it, but then like every day it's like, why aren't more people talking about Vinland Saga? It's so fucking good. It's anime of the year. It's like, no. It's like, okay. No, go ahead.
I was going to say... So the other anime person that we follow on YouTube, if you ever listen to us, hi, thank you, is Gigak. And he made a video.
Yeah, if you happen to listen to this really insanely small channel, hi.
Yeah,
big
fan. We are huge fans. Thank you. You inspired us to do this ourselves.
But it wasn't the only reason. But yeah. And
Gigak, I felt like, because as soon as I saw the title, I was like, oh, Sugar.
And of course, I watch all of his videos.
So we watched it, and I felt like he was actually very even-handed. He talked about how he's like, I'm really enjoying it right now.
Again,
it was like a projected sort of thing.
I was about to say, again, it's somebody who's read the manga, and it's like, oh, trust me, it'll be good. And he does make good points about Askeladd being a good character study and stuff. Like, I'm not going to repeat what he said because he had valid points. I just personally... I just don't see the high quality that people are giving it. I see quality, I just don't see high quality.
And
I would have never been like, oh, fucking anime of the year, anime of the season, let alone.
Like I could see us having it in the 8th to 9th spot for anime of the year if it makes our top 10 at all. Because we've got a strong list.
This year's been in
we've
October is going to be another
season. Yeah, another season coming up where it's like, oh.
I'm sure My Hero Academia will get on that list. Not because, again, it's the hype train and I've read the manga. It's just the fact that
it has been consistent quality.
Yeah, it's like he's insanely consistent and he's a perfectionist. And I know that's what we'll get. And the fact that we've had a lot of great standouts this year that have had the standout that we've wanted, even parts that were let's look, for example, at Dororo. Dororo has a lot of story in it that's based on actual history, and that didn't take away from me because it added to the story it wanted to tell rather than it being its entire story. Whereas I feel like Vinland Saga is history, obviously not factual history, but history laced with a revenge story.
I mean, it is fairly consistent with, these were the actual battles that were happening.
Again,
at the time.
I said, loose history.
And
it's based on history, but loosely.
And it's, I think you used a good word. It's romanticizing it. It is mythologizing. I'm going to make that a word if it's not a word. Mythologizing it, where it's like, this character that we were talking about existed. Did he throw trees at people? No. But he was very big.
I mean,
and
there were people who
powerful.
could do that kind of shit, but I don't offhand know if Thorkel could actually do that.
Yeah. And so it's so you're making a point for this.
There were people that were beasts, though, just insanely strong.
And I love the fact they showed the Vikings as being these huge human beings that were just
they were big.
All they cared about was fighting, so they were much better at it than everybody else. So when they entered the battlefield, it was oh no, unless they were on your side, and then you're like, oh, thank goodness.
History aside, in the sense of saying everything that they got right or wrong, I said, it's a loose history. I just find that it's a simple story, and if you're going to do that, I just feel make it really good. And again, I know it gets better. I don't need to see all the comments from Twitter or here or whatever. I know it gets better. That's great. I can't wait. Because obviously we'll keep watching it. I have no plans of dropping it. I just feel... Take, for example, one of my favorite stories. And of course I don't remember all of it right now because I'm tired. Is The Count of Monte Cristo. And it's a story basically about revenge. But the entire story of finally reaching that revenge is meaningful and entertaining and great on its own. And I know some of you would be like, that's a shit story, but whatever, that's my opinion. It's the same with Vinland Saga. If you're going to have a revenge story, make it something that's kind of different. These are stories that I've read lots in history, in other shows, of getting revenge, kind of empathizing with your asshole, kind of like Stockholm Syndrome in the sense that he's doing with Askeladd, where he's conflicted of actually being a father figure, but being the person you want to kill. It's been done. I want to see something different. I want to see something interesting. I've seen some interesting things, obviously, I've said, Askeladd and Thorkel, and we have, Canute, the prince there and stuff we've seen. And not to say that he's solely different either. He's been seen lots of times in anime, or in history itself. But I feel there needs to be more substance to get the praise it's getting. I'm glad that a lot of you haven't seen this before, because that's great. I like when more content's made that it doesn't have a lot of volume in it, in the sense of a silent voice, not a lot of stuff about a lot of deaf people, about handicap, being disabled, whichever word you prefer. I know a lot of people take offense to certain words relating to disabilities, relating to Vikings, relating to things that aren't heavily populated in the anime world. Obviously, we've seen tons of isekai, we've seen tons of all sorts of shit. But even though that isn't fully taken up in anime, I feel that's a great way for it to make a big statement. But that's me personally. Yes, it's made a couple statements. Oh god, sorry, hiccups. And staking its claim and being look, we can do great animation. Look, we can do interesting characters. But do more. and I hope it does do more in the seasons upcoming, because I'm assuming it's going to go on for a while. I don't know how long, because, like, again, I don't know the manga. But I just feel like right now it's lacking. And I know it's not necessarily its fault, but at the same token it is. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah. I think I think for us it's a victim of its own hype. It doesn't offend me in the same, like, and I don't think it offends Sugar in the same way that, like, when people will come up to me like, SAO is the best anime ever made, and we're just like,
that's a different nerve.
that is, like, offensive.
It's reflective when people say that's my favorite thing ever, because then I'm like, yes, it is your favorite thing. It's not perfect. It's your favorite, for sure. I can 100%
or if they argue
agree
like,
on that.
That's the best anime ever, it's like, yeah, and so I just think that on the whole, I think that Sugar is maybe being a little harsh on it because, again, it's a victim of its own hype, and when you hear, like, from so many people that this is going to be, when you list off Berserk as one of the things where you're like, it's to that level.
I was fucking ready when they said Berserk. I was like, let's get the gore fest going. Like, let's do this.
And to be fair, for, like, the 90s anime, not what happened later.
Oh, God, we don't talk about that. That
didn't happen.
No.
So, like, yes, if you're going to...
I was like, let's get dark, let's get gory, let's get fucking into it. Like...
and so far, I would say if you compare these two after their first, like, 12 episodes or so, like, it's no contest that Berserk is a much better experience thus far.
Yeah.
And so that's probably where it is, and I think that, you know, Sugar is just like, it doesn't warrant the kind of attention that it's getting. It doesn't warrant people already proclaiming it to be the best anime of the year.
And I knew this was coming, not in the sense of it being the manga and hearing that it was good. In the sense that as soon as I saw it was Vikings, lots of people like Viking content. And that's nothing wrong with that. I like Vikings too. Lots of people do. It's just the fact that now that I'm watching it, it's not, in my opinion, anything special in the sense of story or content.
Yeah, not
in
yet.
In that sense. I'm not saying in any way that it's bad in the sense of animation, other than CG. I will never admit the CG is good in that, because it's not. The animation's good. The characters that we have some development with is good. The reality of what history would have been or has been is true and good. It's just the fact that, I guess if I chalk it up into one word, it's really boring for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure not everyone feels the same way. Oddly enough, the last week I've seen a couple of people say that to me, that it's really boring. And, you know, to each their own. If you've never seen something like this, this probably isn't boring to you. If you've seen stuff that's a little tamer, this might be interesting to you. Even if you've seen stuff like Berserk, you might like this. It's just the fact to me that it's a story that we've seen before many times, and then reskinned in Vikings.
I've got it. I know what it is. I know exactly what it is, the way that you're trying to say it. So
there's
far,
a hole inside me, and I don't know what that is.
Vinland Saga is making history boring. And that pretty much kind of personally offends you. That, like, this is some of the coolest history that we've ever known. There's so much cool stuff that could have been going on. We could be focusing so much more on, like, a character who's going against the trends and all this sort of stuff. And we boil it down to a revenge movie, a revenge story that we've seen play out over and over and over again. The part where this is going to be interesting is when Askeladd is gone. And then we see what happens.
That's what's going to be really bad.
No, I think that's when it's going to get interesting, because then we actually see, like, what happens after the fact.
Well, with our main character, we'll see him have his inner turmoil fully boil over, but...
And there's still going to be, like, war happening. There's going to be all this sort of stuff. I'm actually really, really interested to see what will happen when Askeladd is gone.
I feel like it'll be incredibly meaningful on a lot of levels, but I feel like what you said has some merit, in the sense that I am a huge fan of history. And even for history that I don't know a lot about, like, I don't know everything about Vikings. Let me make that perfectly clear. It is not my niche. But, but it is something I know a decent amount enough to know that obviously who are real characters in there. I shouldn't say real, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That were at one point real. And some of the story timeline, so to speak. And I guess those are my two biggest things. Is the reskinning that nobody seems to mind, which I do. And the other part I didn't think about till Jeff said is the fact that I find history insanely interesting. I can tell you any story and explain to you why it's important or interesting or intriguing. Our friends kind of laugh and smile because I get really into it and I get like really excited about it. And to have the most interesting moments boiled down to the boat on the hill, and I'm not going to say what happens.
Yeah.
Being the most interesting thing we see with them is somewhat disheartening at this point. Other than being, you know, they kill and they eat and they pillage. Okay.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
And it's like...
and the fact that, like, our main character is boring and his, like...
Well, main character.
Yeah, and, like, the inner turmoil that he's supposed to be representing isn't really being represented very well. That is upsetting, especially when it's, like, the characters that are bucking the trend, like you said, Prince Canute, his story is going to be super, super interesting. You've got a Torkel, who is really neat, and it's interesting to look at, like, if you take the mythos of the Viking life to its extreme, what happens. Askeladd, who's, like, you know, he's got this almost, like, pirate-type, like elements to him, and he's very, very, he's just really interesting in this world where he doesn't seem like he's the strongest. He doesn't seem like he's the smartest.
Is rather strong.
He's very skilled.
Times, yeah.
But, I mean, he also, like, he was the very first one to just be like, oh, Torkel is there. Let's go. He's like, I ain't touching that. Yeah. Whereas other people, like, the mentality of this time was like, I'm willing to die and go to Valhalla and, like, I will die honorably in battle. And he's like, hell no! Yeah. Let's go that direction instead, away from the killing beast.
It's like, Ragnarok is inevitable, so let's just, you know, fucking
live as long as we can.
Yeah.
And I will say, the last few episodes have definitely piqued my curiosity a little bit more. I feel like it's getting more interesting. So it is getting there. But yeah, people proclaiming it as the anime of the year, I'm like, I don't even know if it's going to be in the top 10.
And that's the thing with the only character I feel like there's legitimate development is Askeladd. If you've listened to his comments and things, it shows that he's very aware and insightful. And he's very, what's the word I want to say? I don't want to say predictive, but he knows what's coming in a sense. Not in a prophetic way, but in a knowledge of what has happened repeatedly. Yeah. Kind of like history! But anyways, I don't feel like a lot of the other characters, like, especially our male main character, it pisses me off because they want to seem like it's a struggle, but the only time you see the struggle is in the dreams. Otherwise, it's very straightforward that he wants to murder. And to me, it's not really a struggle anymore as much as it's a conscience trying to speak and not being in turmoil. But anyways.
Yeah. I just want to end it with the whole idea of, like, for people calling it the anime of the year, I don't even know if it's in the top 3 of the season.
I was about to say, if you think it's anime of the year, you're wrong. And I can prove why at the end of the year. But like, all seriousness, I respect that you like it. I respect that it gets better. But for me, it doesn't reach the bar of being good enough. Yeah. In the sense of all the hype it's lived up to and everything else. And I know the hype train has killed a lot of anime that way. And a lot of times it was lucky enough to take a lot of passengers along and get on that train. I feel like My Hero Academia took that momentum and quickly rose, and I feel like a lot of people got on the train. I feel like other times where the hype train came, everyone was skeptical, and it worked out incredibly well, like Promised Neverland. Made in Abyss, there was absolutely no train, and everyone was confused of what was happening. And then the instant it was going, everyone got on the train. So it's hard to say.
And then there's, like, examples of Black Clover that had, again, a huge hype train, and I feel like it has never...
It faltered heavily at the beginning starting line, and it got better, but the damage was done for a lot of people.
Yeah, and then here with this, it's like that the train is kind of keeping at the same level, but people are reacting as if it is becoming this amazing thing. And I'm like, it's, like I said, I would give it at its high points right now, like an 8. But hey, like, people, not a lot of people are talking about Fruits Basket, and I think those two in quality are pretty much very similar.
I was about to say, I'm not going to compare it to Fruits Basket because they have two very different things going on. That's just me. But I feel like, to answer abruptly, when people say, why aren't more people talking about Vinland Saga, which to me is already enough, it's because nothing is happening. We have a couple battles, and we have a couple interesting characters, and that's it, in my opinion.
And we kill off our most interesting one.
Yes, I'll put a spoiler in the bottom so I accidentally said that before. But seriously, that's my feelings on it. You can let me know how you feel. I'm sure I know what's coming. If you're just going to get angry about stuff I've already explained and said why, don't bother. But if you have something else you'd like to add, feel free. Again, not shitting on it, just stating as it is, not being on the hype train, being a absent observer, so to speak, and watching it as it plays out rather than being on the hype train. And I don't know if I'll ever be on the hype train if it doesn't get better. If it stays this way, I don't know. But as far as I've been told, it gets better, and I'm hoping so. Yeah. So what are my final thoughts and Jeff's for the season? It was pretty good. A couple hits and misses, some that were complete misses, and other ones that have some promise, and others that have finished. Upcoming the next season, we're really excited for My Hero Academia. Goes without saying, but we'll say it again. 7 Deadly Sins is coming up again. I don't think it's ever made our top 10 just because there was always something that was better or it was lacking. Maybe this season will be different. I know what's coming up in this one because I've done some reading of the manga, and so has Jeff. Not going to be on the hype train because who knows what can happen. So we're excited to see it, but we're not going to hype it up to 1 million because we know that things can happen. Yeah. We know there are a couple other ones that are coming out the next season that should be kind of some wild cards and other stuff.
I mean, we'll do that on another podcast.
Well, incredibly. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have another podcast once we get a couple episodes of each. We can tell you what we're kind of feeling out here. Some of them, I think, aren't even on my radar, and a couple of people are like, yeah, maybe you should. So, those are our thoughts for our summer season 2019. Getting into fall right away, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I was like, when I'm tired, I say the wrong season sometimes. So, you know, after the season, we'll be having our Crunchyroll Awards and all that good shit. And, yeah. It
will be interesting to see as the year kind of ends off, because I think that we have a lot of great anime. I don't think anything has really pulled to the point of like, well, this is obvious. Like, last year for us, it was obvious that an update on the computer was happening. No, it was obvious for us that it was Antarctica. The year before that, it was obvious that it was made in Abyss. Like, there wasn't really a question in our mind. Yeah. And even now, it's like every season, we're like, well, which was better, Promised Neverland or Dororo? Which was better, you know, this or that? And it's... The only thing I want to say about the season is, please, if you haven't looked at Astra yet, please give it a shot. I feel like nobody's talking about it in my anime groups that I talk with online and whatnot. Only one other person I know was watching it, and I was like, this is what I have gotten the most joy out of this season. Yeah, it's it's just the fact that most of the really good anime, I feel like, have gotten their fair share. They've gotten their due. Lots of people are talking about Mob Psycho. Lots of people are talking about Promised Neverland. Not enough people are talking about Dororo, in my opinion, but people who are like, this is awesome. Lots of people are talking about Fire Force. Lots of people are talking about, you know, Vinland Saga and Dr. Stone. Nobody's talking about Astra. And every year there's always at least one or two anime that are really good that just seem to fall through the cracks. Don't let it be Astra. It was good. I gave it a 9. Like, to me, it was excellent. Like,
it was really good.
If you like mysteries, it has great mystery involved.
I love mysteries.
If you like space type stuff, it's great. If you like exploration is kind of an interesting thing. New unique planets, like all of that is all represented in it. It tells a great story without any extra fat. It's essentially just 13 episodes. It knows the story it wants to tell, and it does it in a very cohesive, very good way. Mm-hmm. All of the characters are understandable in what they're doing, and they are likable, or at the very least, like if they're not likable, like there's a reason for it. Mm-hmm. It makes sense, and everything about it, and as well, like it's somewhat. I would say that it does reflect kind of some current thought processes on a lot of different things that are happening in the world and discussions that we're having. So it's. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it will be like anime of the year. It's going to be in my top 10, if not my top 5, unless fall comes in and just absolutely annihilates things. But it's a 9 that I feel like nobody's talking about. And that bugs me.
That's fair. So, yeah, I feel like the season's been pretty good. I feel like the year has been kind of a mixed bag, where even I was looking the other day on Reddit, and somebody had asked, like, what is your number 1 or top 10 of the year? And everybody kind of argued. It wasn't a decisive thing where, like Jeff was saying, A Place Further in the Universe was obvious, and then it was deciding where everything else laid on the top 10. And like the Fierce for You behind it and the very bottom were easy to figure out. It was the middle. But in this case, we're dealing with a lot of anime that was very divisive on if it was good or not, or how good it was. I think most people concisely can say that Mob Psycho was very, very good. Mm-hmm. How many people actually watched that, though, is a different story.
I feel like it's gaining ground.
Gaining ground is different from how many watched it. Yeah. As for Dororo, I feel like it's very undervalued and wasn't watched a lot, actually, from many people I've spoken to. They didn't really give it a mind, or give mind to it. I feel like a lot of other people are really into Symphogear, but I honestly haven't watched that, so I can't make a critical comment, but I feel like, from what I've slightly seen and what other people have told me, I feel like that appraisal's misplaced when you're talking about some of the other heavyweights. It is excellent
at what it does.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball is excellent at what it does.
Yeah. Well, Dragon Ball's on a different level. So when you're talking about competing in any sport, any competition, any bracket, you're dealing with juggernauts or big deals, and I just don't feel like it measures up, so that's not even in the conversation. But I feel like a lot of picks, a lot of times come from personal preference rather than being objective. And I know I can't ask everyone to be like me because it's not possible. There's times even when I'm not objective, but overall I try to be. And I feel like this year is really hard because I don't feel like every anime that is in our top 1 was perfect in every way. There are a couple, actually, now that I think of it. But the rest all have something that a general part of the audience hate. Whether it be, just looking at the list here, of just skimming, of having TNA, of having pacing issues, about being about a topic that's not easy to swallow, about, you name it. So it's going to be an odd list to think of and trying to argue, because even Jeff and I, like he was saying, we go back and forth from time to time and we get stumped and get down to like the very nitty gritty of like nitpicky to try and think of what's better.
I would assume...
I can give an example, but I don't want to say it.
I was just going to say, I think I know currently what our number 1 and 2 is, but I think we might swap them.
We'll see, because I don't even know if you know. No, I don't want you to say, because that'll be our top 10 of the year, and I don't want anybody to get an inkling which way we're swinging.
Well, but I mean, fall is still coming up, so like lots of things can change.
I don't think, honestly, after fall, much will change. I feel like there might be 2 that are added to the list. I know one for certain, the other I'm not certain, and I'm not saying it's 7 Deadly Sins either. We will see. I don't feel like much will change, and honestly, I've always had a place for My Hero Academia on the list because I know what's coming.
It's been second 2 years in a row for
Yeah,
us,
I know.
so it's like...
Everyone makes the jokes that it cleans up, but it's a reason it does well. It's not just because it's a hype train. It's the fact that there's legitimate quality there. And I can back that up with actual statements, unlike Vinland Saga. And I'm not taking pot shots here. I mean, legitimately, there are tons of... I can make a list of exactly what works with My Hero Academia, where I couldn't have as much substantial facts about Vinland Saga. So my point... I don't remember where I was going for a second there. Long story short, I feel like there was always a place on the top 10s for My Hero Academia because I know what's coming. And if it shits the bed, well, then obviously I'd take it off the list. But I always knew it would be on there. Just because I know the creator, not personally, obviously, but based on all the shit I've read from him and any kind of interview or whatever, I know the kind of person he is. So I feel like I know things that are certainly on the list and other things where it's going to be a dance, where we're going to be kind of swapping back and forth this year. This year will be harder to kind of pin down what deserves its spot and what doesn't deserve to be on the list. Because even Vinland Saga deserves to be in the conversation. As for will it be able to compete with some of the heavy hitters, I am skeptical.
I was going to say, I think the anime that will be in the top 10 or maybe might be fairly easy this year, but where they're placed is going to be quite difficult. Whereas
I don't know.
I feel like the past 2 years that we've done this, once you get into like the 7 through 10, we had like 6 or 7 different anime that we wanted to fit in there, which is why we had honorable mentions.
Yeah, we argued a lot.
Yeah.
Not like in a very dark or twisted way, but like we got really into it.
Yeah, we got into nitty gritty
passionately about like why this deserved to be higher or lower, what have you.
But
I think the only time we've ever been really wrong, and I wouldn't even say really wrong because a lot of it had working for it, just the way it ended was terrible, was Karakuri Circus. Otherwise, I feel like everything we planned out was deserved.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would say that we've ever really had a big disagreement on, and then you ended up kind of convincing me that I maybe had just my own personal bias based on what I was reading into it versus what was being shown.
What the hell was that?
Overlord.
Oh, yeah.
Overlord was one that I was reading.
He fought hard to get that on the list, and I fought hard for it not to be on the list.
I was reading a lot into it that it wasn't being shown, but I was reading into it like, oh, like this is a really cool element. And you'd be like, but did they do anything with that element? Did they show it? And I'm like, I mean, sort of. And you're like, sort of isn't. Sort of isn't yes. And I was like, okay, like that's fine. I get it. And so we kind of talked that one down. I think the other one that I don't know if I praised it more highly, and then I had to kind of talk you into
Which one was
it? Galactic Heroes. That I was very big on.
You were very passionate about it, and you had it much higher, and I think I fought you down.
Down a couple of spots where I was like, okay, like I get what you're saying. And now, like, I want season 2.
Anyways, personal feelings aside about what we'd like. Thank you for joining us. We'll definitely be making another podcast for the upcoming season. We'll just have to get a couple episodes in to get some bearings. Otherwise, thank you for joining me, Jeff.
Always, of course.
And as always, until next time, we will see you later.